Not a breakthrough, but perhaps it will lead to more meetings and more negotiations, which will head us down a genuine political road towards an equitable settlement. Thus summed up Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert his surprise meeting at his Jerusalem residence with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. Some commentators, however, view the late Saturday evening meeting as too late and producing too little. Too late in the sense that Olmert has been in power already for 9 months, and that if he is indeed serious about ditching unilateralism as a basic strategy and discovering a serious and viable Palestinian partner with whom to pursue a peace negotiating strategy, such a meeting with the head of the Palestinian Authority should have come much sooner. And too little, because although Israel has already, in the wake of the meeting, released tax funds collected on behalf of the Palestinians, funds which Israel had frozen after Hamas took over the reins of government, there's no movement on the critical issue of prisoner release. And that during the 9 months that Olmert has been in power, the political standing of both leaders, both Olmert and Abbas, has eroded, in a way in which it makes it hard to see how they can transform the good atmosphere at this initial meeting into a serious political process. Despite Olmert's positive talk about the meeting, few are predicting major results. But perhaps that's because a more fundamental question still has to be resolved, an issue first and foremost among the Palestinians themselves rather than between Palestinians and Israelis. Events of recent years have demonstrated palpably that whenever they tackle Israel head-on, Palestinians unite. In contrast, events of recent weeks have been about their armed struggle turning inward as rival Palestinian groups tackle each other in the streets of Gaza and Ramallah. That's because the divide between the battling Fatah and Hamas militias is an existential one. A divide not over the existence of their own state, but rather over the existence of their neighbor state. It's about Palestinian recognition of Israel. Now, the question being asked now is this: is Palestine literally on the brink of civil war? On one hand, it can be said that the rift is nowhere nearly as serious as that. Palestinian society will simply not allow the current violent scrapping in the streets to slide into full-scale civil strife. But in another respect, the rift is truly elemental. It's a rift which threatens literally the state of Palestine from coming into existence at all. Ranged against the Hamas determination not to recognize Israel, President Mahmoud Abbas insists that only by doing precisely that will Palestinians ever be able to win their fundamental rights. In truth, the issue of mutual recognition, Palestine of Israel, Israel of Palestine, is the battle which Abbas was already waging when he was still but Yasser Arafat's deputy and heir. Now, it's really something of a mistaken conception that the diplomatically restrained Abbas is more dovish than his predecessor. Courteous, soft-spoken, the Palestinian president indeed is. But in terms of commitment to Palestinian national interests, he stands as strong even as Hamas, and everything suggests that he would be ideologically firm on Palestinian rights should final negotiations with Israel ever materialize. In the Oslo peace process, going back to the early 1990s, Israelis and Palestinians indeed mutually recognized each other's existence. But whereas the Palestinians recognized the existence of the State of Israel, Israel was obliged only to recognize the PLO, then the representative of the Palestinian national movement, postponing recognition of the future state of Palestine to the very end of the peace process. That, for Abbas, was the fundamental flaw in the peacemaking process begun in Oslo. It made him pessimistic about the outcome of the bid to secure a comprehensive peace made at Camp David in the year 2000. And in his view, eventually it killed Oslo off entirely, barely months after that failed summit. But this is not just a debate or questioning about something in the past. It's absolutely relevant right now. Since the Hamas counter-principle to Abbas, the ideology of non-recognition of Israel, undercuts any would-be peace moves. It is also the epicenter of the current Palestinian predicament. For the current struggle among Palestinians is not just about power, it's a deep rift over ideology. Hawk, though Mahmoud Abbas may be on Palestinian rights, refugees, Jerusalem and final borders, what he seeks to impress on Hamas is the centrality of the principle that the militant Islamic groups will simply not acknowledge, that it is a fundamental Palestinian interest to stick with their previous recognition of Israel's right to exist. And beyond Hamas, Abbas is seeking to impress on all Palestinians that Hamas's persistent "never ever will we recognize Israel" means simply that the Israeli occupation will persist, that Palestinian dependency on Israel will be further entrenched, and that above all Palestinians will ultimately fail in their efforts to win Western support for recognition of their basic rights. This centrality of the debate among Palestinians on the issue of recognition of Israel is no longer the case within Israel itself. Recognition of a Palestinian state used to be indeed a make-or-break issue of Israeli politics. But none of the Israeli leaders who supported the peace process of the 90s, Yitzhak Rabin, Shimon Peres or Ehud Barak, ever did what two leaders who opposed the Oslo process have done, that is Ariel Sharon and present Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, namely to accept up front the creation of the State of Palestine as a prelude to peacemaking, not merely as the outcome of peacemaking. The recent finding of the American-Iraq Study Group seeks to posit a concrete linkage between a two-state solution, Palestine and Israel, as the solution to the overall Middle East problem. But the key link does not yet have to do with a projected Israeli-Palestinian settlement. The key link is that between Palestinians recognizing Israel's existence and the coming into existence of a Palestinian state. This struggle among Palestinians still hangs in the balance. But what is already patently clear, though Palestinians don't seem to want to appreciate that, is that whichever way their own ideological war unfolds, unless Abbas wins his battle, Israel will simply be in a position to continue avoiding the necessary grappling with the concrete issues that lie behind the creation of a Palestinian state. And thus, to the disadvantage of both peoples perhaps, the key issues of final borders, Palestinian refugees, and sovereignty over Jerusalem will simply go on being unaddressed.